The crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the Grandview concert hall as Alina wiped down the keys of the grand piano one last time. It was nearly 8 in the evening, and she should have left an hour ago. But that was the thing about being a piano tuner. You didn't just fix the instruments and walk away. You made sure every note sang perfectly, especially on nights like this. Tonight, the hall was hosting one of those fancy charity events where tickets cost more than most people made in a month. Alina had seen plenty of these galas during her 3 years working here. Rich people in expensive clothes, champagne flowing like water, and usually some decent music if they hired the right performers. She gathered her tools into her worn leather bag, the same one her mother had given her on her 18th birthday. That felt like a lifetime ago now. Alina was 28, living in a small apartment across town, and her biggest concern, most days, was whether she'd remembered to buy groceries on the way home as she turned to leave through the side entrance. Her bag caught the edge of a music stand. The crash echoed through the hall like a gunshot. Sheet music scattered across the polished floor, and suddenly every head in that glittering crowd turned to look at her. Alina felt her face burn. She dropped to her knees, scrambling to pick up the papers with shaking hands. This was exactly the kind of attention she'd spent years trying to avoid. Her heart hammered in her chest as whispers rippled through the guests. "Let me help you with that." A man's voice, smooth and confident. Alina looked up to see someone she recognized from the news. Vincent Zhao, the tech billionaire who'd made his fortune before he turned 30. He was younger than she expected, maybe late 30s, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "I'm so sorry," Alina stammered, gathering the last of the papers. "I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just finishing up, and you work with the piano?" Vincent asked, ignoring her apology. "Tune them. Maintain them. Make sure they sound right." He glanced at her hands as she stood up. Alina instinctively tried to hide them, but it was too late. Her fingers were different from the soft, manicured hands of the women in the crowd. They were strong, with calluses in specific places. The hands of someone who worked with instruments every single day. "Those aren't just a tuner's hands," Vincent said quietly. "You play." It wasn't a question. Alina felt something cold settle in her stomach. She shook her head quickly. "Not anymore. I used to, but that was a long time ago." The crowd had mostly returned to their conversations, but a few people nearby were still watching with curious expressions. Vincent seemed to consider her for a moment. Then his face lit up with the kind of smile that probably closed million-dollar deals. "I'll tell you what," he said, loud enough that heads turned again. "I'm feeling generous tonight. Play something on that piano, just one piece, and I'll donate an extra $1 million to the Children's Music Fund." The hall went quiet. Completely, utterly quiet. Alina could hear her own breathing, could feel hundreds of eyes on her again. This couldn't be happening. This was the kind of thing that happened in movies, not real life. "Mr. Zhao, I appreciate the offer, but I can't. $2 million, he said, his voice carrying across the room now. $2 million for one performance. That's a lot of music lessons for kids who can't afford them. Alina's mind raced. She looked at the piano, that beautiful instrument she'd just spent an hour perfecting. She knew every inch of it, knew exactly how it would respond under her fingers. But knowing how to tune a piano and actually performing in front of people were completely different things. "I'm really not a performer," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm just a technician." "You want someone who actually plays for a living?" An older woman in the front row spoke up. "Oh, let the girl go, Vincent. You're embarrassing her." But Vincent was already pulling out his phone, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. Alina watched in horror as he started reading aloud. "Alina Chen, first place, National Youth Piano Competition, age 16. Full scholarship to the Manhattan Conservatory of Music, graduated top of her class in piano performance." He looked up, his eyebrows raised. "That's quite a resume for someone who's just a technician." The crowd murmured with interest. Alina felt the walls closing in. How had he found all that so quickly? She'd worked hard to leave that life behind, to become invisible. "That was 10 years ago," she said quietly. "Things change. People change. But talent like that doesn't just disappear," Vincent countered. He addressed the crowd now, playing to them like a showman. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a genuine prodigy right here in this room, and she's been hiding in plain sight, taking care of our instruments while we throw parties. Some people laughed. Others looked genuinely intrigued. Alina wanted to sink through the floor. Vincent turned back to her, and for just a moment, his expression softened. I'll make you one more offer. $3 million. And I'll create a full scholarship program in your mother's name. I saw in those search results that she passed away. Let her legacy help other kids who love music but can't afford proper training. Elena's breath caught. Mentioning her mother was a low blow, intentional or not. Her mom had worked herself to exhaustion to pay for those piano lessons, for that conservatory education. She'd been a housekeeper at 3 different hotels, taking double shifts so Alina could have the best teachers, and Alina had thrown it all away. The memory of that night, 7 years ago, crashed over her. The stage lights too bright, the audience too large, her hands frozen over the keys, unable to move, unable to breathe. She'd run off that stage and never looked back. Her mother had told her it was okay, that everyone gets scared sometimes, that she could try again. But Alina never did. Now her mother was gone, and Alina spent her days maintaining pianos for other people to play. It was safe, quiet, no one watching, no one judging, no chance of failure, because she never tried. Please, she said softly. I can't. But the crowd was getting into it now. Someone called out, come on, just one song. Another person joined in, then another. The peer pressure built like a wave, and Vincent just stood there. Watching her with those calculating eyes, Alina looked at the piano again. Her piano really, she'd tuned it. She knew its voice better than anyone in this room. Her fingers twitched involuntarily, remembering patterns and progressions she hadn't played in years. $3 million. A scholarship program in her mother's name, all for 15 minutes of playing, maybe less. When would she ever have a chance to honor her mom like that again? When would her fear ever matter less than helping dozens of kids pursue their dreams? The room waited. Vincent waited. The piano waited. Alina took a step forward, then another. Her legs felt like they might give out. But she kept walking toward that glossy black instrument that had been both her greatest love and her deepest source of pain. She sat down on the bench and adjusted it to the right height, her hands moving on autopilot. The crowd shifted closer, forming a semicircle around the piano. Alina could feel their anticipation, their curiosity, and underlying it all, their doubt. Who was this random worker claiming to be some kind of former prodigy? Her hands hovered over the keys. 7 years. It had been 7 years since she had played for anyone but herself. Alone in practice rooms where no one could hear her mistakes, this was either going to be the worst decision of her life or something else entirely. Alina closed her eyes, took one deep breath, and let her fingers fall onto the keys. The first note that came from the piano was shaky. Alina could hear it herself, that slight tremor that told everyone in the room she was nervous. Her fingers felt stiff, unfamiliar with the keys, despite having just tuned this very instrument an hour ago. She'd chosen Chopin's Ballade No. 1. It was the piece her mother used to request whenever Alina practiced at home. Back then, they'd lived in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment where the upright piano took up half the living room. Her mom would sit on the old couch with a cup of tea, eyes closed, just listening. But right now, those memories weren't helping. Alina's hands fumbled through the opening measures. She hit a wrong note, then another. Someone in the crowd coughed. She could practically feel their disappointment. Their confusion about why Vincent had made such a big deal about this clearly mediocre player. Her mind started spiraling. This was exactly what happened 7 years ago. The same crushing pressure, the same certainty that she was about to humiliate herself in front of everyone. Her breathing got shallow. The notes on the page in her mind started to blur. Then something strange happened. Her hands, moving almost on their own, found a passage she'd played 1,000 times. It was the part where the melody builds, where Chopin lets the pianist show both power and tenderness. Elena's fingers remembered what her mind had forgotten. The music started to flow. She let herself drift back to those early days when piano wasn't about performance or pressure, when she was just a 7-year-old kid who thought making sounds on a keyboard was the coolest thing in the world. Her first teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had been strict but kind. She'd taught Elena in a small studio above a bakery, and the whole place always smelled like fresh bread. Mrs. Rodriguez had these old-fashioned ideas about posture and hand position, and she'd make Elena practice scales for what felt like hours. But she also taught her that music wasn't just about hitting the right notes. It was about telling a story. Every piece is a conversation, Mrs. Rodriguez used to say. You're not performing at people. You're talking to them, sharing something with them. Elena had been a fast learner. Too fast, maybe. By the time she was 10, she was entering competitions. By 12, she was winning them. Her mother would take days off work she couldn't afford to lose, just to drive Elena to different cities for performances. They'd stay in cheap motels and eat gas station sandwiches, but her mom never complained. Not once. You have a gift, her mother told her after she won the state championship at 14. Not everyone gets a gift like this. You have to use it, Mia. You have to share it with the world. The pressure of that gift had felt heavier with each passing year. Elena got the scholarship to Manhattan Conservatory, one of the best music schools in the country. She should have been thrilled. And she was, at first. But the other students there were incredible. Every single one of them had been the best in their hometown, their state, their region. Now they were all competing against each other. Elena practiced 8 hours a day, sometimes more. Her hands would cramp and her back would ache, but she pushed through. She had to be perfect. Had to prove she deserved to be there. Had to make sure her mother's sacrifices weren't wasted. By her senior year, she was exhausted. Not just physically, but emotionally. The joy she'd felt as a kid, playing above that bakery, had been replaced by constant anxiety. Every practice session felt like a test she might fail. Every performance was a chance for people to see she wasn't as good as they thought. Her final recital was supposed to be her triumph. She'd prepared for months, choosing one of the most challenging pieces in the piano repertoire. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto? No, too. It was ambitious, maybe too ambitious, but Elena wanted to prove something. To herself, to her teachers, to her mother sitting in the audience who'd given up everything for this moment. Elena remembered walking onto that stage. The lights were so bright she could barely see the audience, just a dark mass of people waiting to judge her. The conductor gave her the signal. The orchestra started playing, and then it was her turn. Her hands lifted over the keys, and froze. Just completely froze. She couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't breathe. The orchestra kept playing, waiting for her to come in, but she just sat there like a statue. The conductor looked at her with concern. Someone in the audience whispered. The sound of it echoed through the concert hall, and that whisper turned into murmurs. And those murmurs felt like screaming in Elena's ears. She stood up and ran. Just ran right off the stage, through the backstage area, out the back door of the building. She kept running until her legs gave out. Then she sat on a curb 3 blocks away, cried until she couldn't cry anymore. Her mother found her there an hour later. Didn't say anything, just sat down next to her and held her hand. They sat like that until it got dark. I'm sorry, Elena had whispered. I'm so sorry. I wasted everything. All your work, all that money, all those years. Stop, her mother said firmly. You didn't waste anything. You're 21 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. This is just one night. But it hadn't been just one night. That moment had broken something in Elena. She finished her degree because she'd come too far to quit. But she never performed publicly again. She couldn't. The thought of it made her physically ill. After graduation, she moved back home and started working odd jobs. Music store clerk. Private lesson assistant. Eventually, she learned piano tuning from an old craftsman who needed an apprentice. It turned out she had a knack for it. The technical side of pianos made sense to her. And best of all, She could work with music without having to perform it. Her mother never pushed, never asked when Alina would play again. She seemed to understand that her daughter needed time, needed space. Maybe she thought Alina would eventually find her way back. But then her mother got sick. Cancer, fast and aggressive. She was gone within 6 months. Alina had played at the funeral, just one simple hymn, and even that had nearly destroyed her. It was the last time she'd played in front of more than one person, until tonight. Back in the concert hall, Alina's hands were flying across the keys now. The technical skills she'd honed through years of intense training merged with something new, something deeper. All that grief, all that regret, all those years of running from her fear poured into the music. She wasn't playing for the crowd anymore. She wasn't playing for Vincent's donation or the scholarship fund. She was playing for her mother, who'd believed in her even when Alina stopped believing in herself. She was playing for that 7-year-old kid who just loved making beautiful sounds. She was playing for every version of herself she'd lost along the way. The ballroom had gone completely silent. No coughing, no whispering, no shuffling feet. Just the piano, singing out Alina's story to a room full of strangers, who'd become witnesses to something unexpected and real. Her eyes were closed now. She'd stopped seeing the notes in her mind and started feeling them in her chest. The music swelled and dipped, powerful and tender. Exactly the way Mrs. Rodriguez had taught her all those years ago. This was the conversation. This was what she'd been running from. Not failure, but this moment of complete vulnerability, sharing her whole heart with people she didn't know. And for the first time in 7 years, Alina wasn't afraid. The final chord rang out through the concert hall, and Alina let it fade naturally. She didn't rush it, didn't try to fill the silence with anything else. She just let the music complete its journey the way it was meant to. Her hands stayed on the keys for a moment longer. She was afraid to open her eyes, afraid to see the faces in the crowd and remember that she'd just played her heart out in front of 300 strangers. The fear was trying to creep back in now that the music had stopped. Then she heard it. A single pair of hands clapping, then another, and another. Alina opened her eyes as the applause built like a wave crashing over her. People weren't just clapping politely the way they did at these fancy events. They were standing up. Every single person in that room was on their feet. The sound was deafening. She saw a woman in a silver dress wiping tears from her cheeks. An older man in the front row had his hand over his heart. Even the catering staff who'd been standing by the walls had stopped. What they were doing to applaud Alina stood up from the piano bench, her legs shaky. She didn't know what to do with her hands. Should she bow, wave? She settled for a small nod, completely overwhelmed by what was happening. Vincent was the first to reach her. His eyes were bright, and there was something in his expression that looked almost like vindication, like he'd known this would happen all along. "That was extraordinary," he said, and his voice had lost all its showman quality. He sounded genuine. "I've been to 100 concerts, heard pianists who charge $50,000 per performance, and I've never heard anything like that." "I don't know what to say," Alina managed. Her voice came out hoarse. "Thank you for pushing me. I guess the $3 million is yours," Vincent said. "I'll have my people set up the scholarship fund in your mother's name by the end of the week. But Alina, I think that's just the beginning." Before she could ask what he meant, a woman appeared at Vincent's elbow. She was probably in her 50s, dressed in an elegant black pantsuit, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob. She had the kind of presence that made you pay attention even in a crowded room. "Forgive the interruption," the woman said, extending her hand to Alina. "Keiko Yamada. I direct the National Symphony Orchestra." Alina shook her hand automatically, her brain still trying to catch up with what was happening. The National Symphony Orchestra. She'd listened to their recordings as a student. They were one of the most prestigious orchestras in the country. "That performance was remarkable," Keiko continued. "Raw, yes. You're clearly out of practice technically in some areas. But the emotional depth, the musicality, the way you shaped each phrase, that's not something that can be taught. That's pure artistry." "Thank you," Alina said, unsure where this was going. "We're planning our season schedule for next year," Keiko said. I'd like to feature you as a guest soloist. We do a series every spring showcasing emerging artists. I think you'd be perfect for it." Alina felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. "I'm not an emerging artist. I'm a piano tuner. I haven't performed publicly in 7 years, until literally 5 minutes ago." "Which makes your story even more compelling," Keiko said with a slight smile. "Think about it. You don't have to decide tonight. Here's my card. Call me when you're ready." She pressed a business card into Elena's hand and disappeared back into the crowd. A man in a navy suit approached next. "Richard Chen, Apex Records. We specialize in classical crossover artists. I'd love to talk to you about a recording contract." Then came a woman with spiky purple hair and multiple cameras hanging around her neck. "I'm a documentary filmmaker. Your story is exactly the kind of thing I love to explore. Talent silenced by trauma, finding its voice again. We should talk." More people crowded around. A music academy wanted her to teach. A magazine wanted to interview her. Someone wanted her to play at their daughter's wedding. The attention came at her from all sides, everyone talking at once. Pressing cards and phones numbers into her hands, Elena's chest tightened. The applause had felt good, even healing in a way. But this was too much. All these people wanting pieces of her, making assumptions about her future. Treating her like she was already someone she wasn't sure she wanted to be. "Excuse me," she said, her voice getting lost in the noise. "I need to." "Excuse me?" She pushed through the crowd, not rudely but firmly, heading for the side door she'd almost used an hour ago. The door that would have let her slip away unnoticed before any of this happened. Her hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from nerves about playing. It was from the crushing weight of expectations. She could feel settling on her shoulders. The cool night air hit her face as she stepped outside. The concert hall had a small courtyard with a fountain and some benches, usually empty this time of night. Alina sat down heavily on the nearest bench and put her head in her hands. What had she just done? Playing that piece was supposed to help kids get music scholarships. It wasn't supposed to turn her whole life upside down. She liked her quiet life. She liked tuning pianos and going home to her cat and not having to worry about anyone judging her, running away again. Vincent's voice made her look up. He was standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I'm not running," Alina said defensively. "I'm taking a break." "There's a difference, is there?" He sat down on the bench beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "Because it looks a lot like what you did 7 years ago. Something amazing happens. You get scared, and you bolt." "You don't know anything about what happened 7 years ago," Alina shot back. "You're right, I don't. But I know what I saw in there. You weren't just playing notes. You were completely present, completely alive. And then the minute it was over and people responded, you couldn't get out of that room fast enough." Lena was quiet for a moment. She hated that he was right. It's overwhelming. All those people wanting things from me, expecting me to be something I'm not. What do you think they expect? A comeback story. A triumph over adversity. The prodigy who returned from obscurity to reclaim her place in the spotlight. Lena rubbed her face tiredly. That's not who I am. I had one good performance tonight. One. That doesn't erase 7 years of running away, or the fact that I chose to become a piano tuner instead of a performer. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, watching the fountain. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it all night. Can I tell you why I really did this? Why I pushed you so hard to play? Because you're a billionaire who's bored and likes making dramatic gestures. He laughed, a real laugh. Fair guess, but no. I have a daughter. She's 14. 2 years ago, she played violin in her school's winter concert. She was first chair, really talented. But during her solo, she missed a note. Just one note. A tiny mistake that probably nobody even noticed. She noticed, Elena said quietly. She noticed, and she quit. Just stopped playing entirely. Wouldn't touch the violin? We tried everything, but she was done. Said she wasn't good enough, that she'd embarrass herself again. Vincent's jaw tightened. I watched her give up something she loved because of one moment of fear, and I couldn't do anything about it. Elena understood now. So when you saw me, Dot dot dot. I saw a chance to prove that one bad moment doesn't have to define everything. Not for you, not for my daughter who might be watching this story unfold, not for anyone. He looked at her directly. You don't have to accept any of those offers in there. You don't have to become some kind of concert pianist if that's not what you want. But don't run away from it just because you're scared. A waiter appeared at the courtyard entrance, looking apologetic. Mr. Zhao, Ms. Yamada asked me to find you. They're ready for your speech. Vincent stood up. Take your time. Think about what you actually want, not what you're afraid of. He started to walk away, then turned back. For what it's worth, your mother would be proud. Not because you played perfectly, but because you tried. He disappeared back inside, leaving Alina alone with the sound of the fountain and the distant hum of the city. She pulled out the stack of business cards from her pocket. Symphony director, record label, documentary filmmaker, music academy, wedding planner. She thought about her apartment, her cat, her regular Tuesday morning appointments tuning pianos at the community center. That life was safe, comfortable. No one expected anything from her except showing up on time and doing good work. But was that really living? Or was it just a different kind of running? Alina stood up and looked back at the concert hall. Through the windows, she could see the crowd still mingling, champagne glasses catching the light. Somewhere in there, people were talking about her performance, making plans, seeing possibilities. The question was, could she see them too? Alina sat in her apartment the next morning, staring at the pile of business cards spread across her coffee table. Her cat, Beethoven, walked across them like they were just another part of his domain. Completely unimpressed by the fact that they represented opportunities most musicians would dream about, she barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back at that piano, feeling the keys under her fingers, hearing the applause. But she also kept seeing the crowd of people afterward, all wanting something from her, all assuming they knew what her future should look like. Her phone buzzed for the 20th time that morning. Another message. Her social media accounts had exploded overnight. Someone had filmed her performance and posted it online. The video already had over 2 million views. The comments were overwhelming. This made me cry. Where has she been hiding? The way she plays is pure emotion. This is what real music sounds like. But there were other comments too. She's clearly rusty. Those first few measures were rough, good, but not professional level yet. It's an interesting story, but let's see if she can actually sustain a career. Alina put her phone face down on the table. This was exactly why she'd stopped performing. It wasn't just about the fear of failing. It was about inviting the whole world to have opinions about her, to judge every note, to decide whether she was good enough. A knock on her door startled her. She wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, she saw Vincent standing in the hallway holding 2 coffee cups. How did you get my address? Alina asked as she opened the door. I'm a billionaire with internet access. It wasn't hard. He offered her one of the cups. Peace offering. Can I come in? Alina stepped aside, too tired to argue. Vincent walked into her small living room, and she saw him take in the details. The upright piano against one wall, clearly old but meticulously maintained. The bookshelves overflowing with sheet music. The framed photo of her mother on the mantel. Nice place, he said, and it didn't sound like he was being polite. He seemed genuine. It's small, but it's mine. Alina sat down on the couch. Why are you here, Vincent? He settled into the armchair across from her. Because I've been where you are. Not exactly, but close enough. When my first company took off, everyone suddenly had plans for me. Investors wanted me to expand faster. The media wanted me to be the next big tech genius. My own family had opinions about what I should do with the money. Everyone knew better than me what my life should look like. I made a lot of mistakes, honestly. Said yes to things I should have said no to. Chased other people's definitions of success. He took a sip of his coffee. It took me years to figure out that the only opinion that really mattered was my own. So I'm here to ask you a question, and I want you to answer honestly. What do you want? Alina laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's the problem. I don't know. Yesterday morning, I wanted to tune pianos and live quietly. Now I have a symphony director offering me a solo performance, a record label wanting to sign me, and millions of people watching a video of the most vulnerable moment of my life. Forget all of that for a second, Vincent said, leaning forward. If none of those people existed, if there were no contracts or opportunities or expectations, would you want to play piano? Not as a job, not as a career, just play, like you did last night. The question hit Alina harder than she expected. She looked at her old upright piano. She'd bought it from a pawn shop 3 years ago, spent weeks restoring it. She played it almost every night when she got home from work, just for herself. Songs her mother loved, pieces that challenged her. Sometimes just improvising, letting her fingers wander. Yes, she said quietly. I love playing. I always have. That's never been the question. Then what is the question? Whether I can handle everything that comes with it. The pressure, the judgment, the possibility of failing in front of everyone again. Alina set her coffee down. You saw what happened to me 7 years ago. I completely froze. What if that happens again? What if I accept Keiko's offer and I get on that stage with a full orchestra and I just... Can't do it? Vincent was quiet for a moment. Can I tell you what I saw last night? I saw someone who was terrified walk up to a piano anyway. I saw you start shaky and push through. I saw you transform fear into something beautiful. That's not weakness, Alina. That's courage. It was one performance. One night where somehow, miraculously, I didn't fall apart. So make it 2 nights. Then 3. Then 4. He pulled something out of his jacket pocket. A business card, but not one of the ones from last night. This one was plain white with just a name and number. This is my daughter's violin teacher. She's been working with kids who have performance anxiety for 20 years. She helped my daughter start playing again, though we're taking it slow. No pressure, just rediscovering the joy. Alina took the card, turning it over in her hands. You don't have to decide everything today, Vincent continued. You don't have to commit to a symphony performance or a recording contract or anything else. But maybe you could start smaller. Work with someone who understands what you're dealing with. Play for small groups. Build your confidence back up. And if you decide you only ever want to play for yourself and your cat, that's fine too. At least it'll be your choice, not fear's choice. After Vincent left, Alina sat with his words for a long time. She picked up Keiko Yamada's business card and stared at it. The National Symphony Orchestra. It was the kind of opportunity that didn't come twice, but the thought of it still made her stomach twist with anxiety. She called the number on the card Vincent had given her. The violin teacher, Mrs. Patterson, answered on the second ring. Her voice was warm and patient, and when Alina explained her situation, she didn't sound surprised. Performance anxiety is more common than people think, Mrs. Patterson said. Especially after a traumatic experience like yours. The good news is, it's something we can work through. Not by ignoring the fear, but by understanding it and building tools to manage it. They set up a meeting for later that week. It felt like a small step, but at least it was a step forward instead of running away. Next, Alina called Keiko Yamada. Her heart pounded as the phone rang. Alina, I'm so glad you called, Keiko said. I watched the video of your performance 3 times last night. It gets better each time. Thank you. I wanted to talk to you about your offer. Alina took a deep breath. I'm interested, but I need time. I haven't performed regularly in years, and I have some anxiety issues I need to work through first. Could we postpone? Maybe look at a timeline of 6 months instead of next season. She expected pushback. Expected Keiko to say the opportunity was now or never. Instead, Keiko laughed gently. Alina, good musicians are worth waiting for. Great musicians are worth waiting even longer. Take your time. Work with a teacher. Practice. Get comfortable again. When you're ready, we'll be here. And honestly, the extra preparation time will only make the performance better. The relief Alina felt was physical. Really? You'd wait? I've been in this business for 30 years. I've learned that rushing artists never ends well. Do this at your pace. The music isn't going anywhere. After she hung up, Alina walked over to her piano. She sat down and placed her hands on the keys, feeling their familiar smoothness. She started playing, nothing specific, just letting muscle memory guide her fingers through scales and arpeggios. Her phone buzzed again. Another message, another comment on the video, another person with an opinion. But for the first time since last night, she didn't feel overwhelmed by it all. She thought about what Vincent had said, about choosing for herself instead of letting fear choose for her, about building back slowly instead of expecting to fix 7 years of trauma in one. Magical performance. Alina opened her laptop and started a new document. At the top, she wrote, 6-month plan. Under it, she listed things that were for her, not for anyone else. Weekly sessions with Mrs. Patterson, practice schedule, but a reasonable one that wouldn't burn her out. Small performances, maybe at nursing homes or community centers, where the stakes were low and the audiences were just happy to hear live music. Technical work with her old conservatory teacher. He'd take her back as a student. And at the bottom, she wrote, National Symphony Orchestra, April performance. Maybe. The maybe felt important. It left room for her to change her mind, to go at her own pace. To be human instead of trying to be perfect. She played for another hour, just for herself. No one filming, no one judging. Just her and the piano and the music her mother used to love. It felt like coming home to something she'd lost. But finding it was still there waiting for her. When she finally stopped, her hands were tired, but in a good way. The way they used to feel after long practice sessions when she was a student. When playing piano was about joy instead of pressure, Alina looked at the business cards still scattered on her coffee table. So many possibilities. So many paths her life could take. But for the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could handle figuring it out. One note at a time. 6 months later, Alina stood backstage at the National Symphony Hall, listening to the orchestra warm-up. The familiar sounds of instruments tuning, musicians running through difficult passages, the conductor giving last-minute instructions, all of it should have calmed her. She'd spent half a year preparing for this moment, but her hands were still shaking. Deep breaths, just like we practiced, Mrs. Patterson said beside her. The violin teacher had become more than just an instructor over the past months. She'd become a friend, a mentor. Someone who understood exactly what Alina was fighting against. Alina nodded, trying to focus on her breathing. In 4 for counts, hold for 4, out for 4. The technique Mrs. Patterson had taught her to manage the anxiety that still crept up at unexpected moments. The past 6 months had been harder than Alina expected, but also better. She'd started small, just like she'd planned. Her first performance after that night at Vincent's gala was at a senior center, playing for about 20 elderly residents. She'd been terrified even for that, but the audience had been so warm, so appreciative, that it reminded her why she'd fallen in love with music in the first place. Then came a community center concert. Then a small church recital. Each one got a little easier, though the fear never completely disappeared. Mrs. Patterson told her that was normal, even healthy. The fear means you care, she'd said. It's what you do with that fear that matters. Alina had also reconnected with her old conservatory teacher, Professor Williams. He'd been shocked to hear from her after all these years, but he'd agreed to work with her again. Their first lesson had been awkward, both of them dancing around what had happened 7 years ago. But by the second lesson, they'd fallen into their old rhythm. And Professor Williams pushed her technically in ways she'd forgotten she needed. You've gotten softer, he told her bluntly during their third session. More emotional, which is good, but you've lost some of the precision. We need to build that back without losing the heart you found. It had been grueling work. 3 hours of practice most days, sometimes more. Her fingers had blistered and cramped. Her back ached from sitting at the piano bench for so long. But slowly, steadily, she'd felt herself improving. The technical skills came back faster than she'd expected, like her hands. Had just been waiting for permission to remember what they knew. The scholarship fund in her mother's name had launched 3 months ago. 15 kids had received full funding for music lessons, instruments, and program fees. Alina had met them all at a small ceremony, and one little girl, maybe 8 years old, had hugged her and said, "Thank you for making it so I can play violin. My mom works really hard, but we couldn't afford it before." Alina had cried in her car afterward. Good tears, healing tears, the kind that meant something broken was finally starting to mend. Vincent had checked in regularly, never pushy but always supportive. He'd brought his daughter, Lily, to one of Elena's community center performances. The girl had watched with wide eyes, and afterwards she'd asked Alina questions about how she dealt with being nervous. They'd talked for almost an hour, just the two of them. It's about fear and music and second chances. 2 weeks later, Vincent had sent Alina a video. Lily playing violin at her school's spring concert. She wasn't perfect, but she was playing and she was smiling. The text with the video just said, "Thank you." Now, standing backstage at the biggest performance of her life, Alina thought about all of it. The journey from that terrified woman in work clothes to this moment. She was wearing a deep blue concert gown that Keiko had helped her pick out. Her hair was styled, her makeup done. Everything professional and polished. But underneath all of it, she was still Alina. Still the girl who'd frozen on stage 7 years ago. Still the woman who'd spent years hiding behind piano tuning instead of facing her fear. The difference was, now she knew that was okay. She didn't have to be perfect. She just had to be real. 5 minutes. A stagehand called out. Mrs. Patterson squeezed her shoulder. "You've got this. Remember, they're not here to judge you. They're here to experience the music with you. It's a conversation, not a test." Alina closed her eyes and thought about her mother. In her mind, she could see her sitting on that old couch in their tiny apartment, eyes closed, just listening. Just being present with the music. That's all Alina needed to do tonight. Be present. Let the music speak. The lights dimmed in the concert hall. Alina heard the audience settling into their seats. The rustling of programs, the expectant silence that came before a performance. Keiko appeared and gave her an encouraging nod. "Ready?" the conductor asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," Alina said, and she meant it. She walked onto the stage, and the applause hit her like a wave. The hall was packed, every seat filled. She saw Vincent in the third row with Lily beside him. Saw Professor Williams near the back, his arms crossed but his eyes proud. Saw Mrs. Patterson in the wings, watching, and in her heart, she felt her mother there too. Alina sat at the piano, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands over the keys. The conductor raised his baton. The orchestra prepared, and Alina took one deep breath. The first notes came out clear and strong. No shaking this time, no hesitation. She'd chosen Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the same piece that had defeated her 7 years ago. Professor Williams had questioned that choice, thought it might be too risky, too much pressure. But Alina had been certain. She needed to face this piece again. Needed to prove to herself that one bad moment didn't own her anymore. The orchestra swelled around her, and Alina let herself sink into the music. It was technical and demanding, requiring every bit of skill she'd rebuilt over the past months. But it was also deeply emotional, full of longing and triumph and everything she'd lived through to get to this moment. There were no flashbacks this time, no spiral of panic. Just her and the piano and the orchestra all working together to create something beautiful. She hit every note she'd missed 7 years ago, played every passage that had seemed impossible back then, and it felt like flying. The audience disappeared. The pressure disappeared. There was only the music, flowing through her fingers like water, like breath, like something that had always been part of her and always would be. When the final notes faded and the orchestra held their last chord, there was a moment of perfect silence. Then the hall erupted. The audience was on their feet before Alina even stood up from the bench. The applause was deafening, and this time, Alina didn't feel overwhelmed by it. She felt grateful. She bowed, and the orchestra stood to acknowledge her. The conductor shook her hand, beaming. Keiko appeared with flowers, her eyes shining with tears. As Alina walked off stage, still hearing the applause behind her, Mrs. Patterson met her with a tight hug. "That was everything I knew you could be," she said. Alina hugged her back, laughing and crying at the same time. "I actually did it. I can't believe I actually did it." "I can," Mrs. Patterson said. "I always could." Later, after the reception and the congratulations and the photos, Alina found a quiet moment, alone, in her dressing room. She pulled out her phone and looked at the wallpaper. A photo of her mother from years ago, smiling in their small apartment. "We did it, Mom," she whispered. "Took me a while, but we got there." Her phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. "Lily hasn't stopped talking about the performance. She wants to know if you give lessons. Also, the scholarship fund just got 5 new donors after tonight." "People are inspired," Alina smiled. She'd been offered 3 more symphony performances already, and the record label had reached out again. But she wasn't in a hurry anymore. She'd learned that building something real took time. That healing wasn't linear, that success wasn't about never being afraid. It was about being afraid and doing it anyway. She thought about that night 6 months ago.
Standing in the concert hall in her work clothes.
Terrified and certain she couldn't do what Vincent was asking. If she could go back and tell that version of herself what was coming, she wondered if she'd believe it. Probably not. But that was okay. Some things you had to live through to understand. Alina gathered her things and headed out into the night. Tomorrow, she'd go back to her regular life. She still tuned pianos, still loved the technical work, the quiet craft of it, but now she also performed. Taught a few students who struggled with anxiety. Worked with the scholarship kids once a month. She'd found a balance, her own path forward that honored both who she'd been and who she was becoming. Not the prodigy everyone expected. Not the failure she'd feared she was. Just Alina, a woman who loved music and finally, after 7 long years, had found her way back to sharing that love with the world. One note at a time.